became the symbol of pawn. St- Sorry. Why did I just stop at pawn?
Brain
That
locked up.
became it did. It did. I think I ran out of transmission fluid all of a sudden then. So the three gold balls became the symbol of a pawn shop. And if we keep that in, listeners, you'll know that we thought that was a great joke there.
Hey everyone, it's Elliot.
And Todd, welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar, an ongoing conversation about pop culture and iconic design.
There are visual icons that have symbolized professions for so long that their origin stories are unknown to the very customers served by them.
These independent businesses are owned by all kinds of people serving millions on a daily basis throughout the world, all using these same basic signs outside their establishments.
Today we're discussing two icons that, unless you're truly in the middle of nowhere, you can find within minutes of where you live, work, or both.
So give your favorite bartender the sign that you're ready for another round and join us as we belly up to the bar.
All right, Todd, so what do you think of my new haircut?
Begs the question, what did you say to make your barber so angry?
Well, I guess I need to pay him. I think that's for starters. I forgot.
That would do it, yeah. Don't go to the same one next time.
No, yeah, I try to, I try to be nimble and stay on the move.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
so I was thinking as I was walking into the barber shop past the spinning pole that we should go super old school and talk about a couple of signs we love.
Okay. Sounds good. As you know, I was swinging by a pawn shop to grab a few bucks to cover this ever-growing bar tab, and I was thinking kind of the same thing.
Todd, look, we don't have time for all that. And you
All
didn't
right,
need
all right.
those gold chains anyway. But before we talk about these two signs, maybe a quick history lesson is in order.
All right.
So, signs, first religious and then commercial, have existed for millennia.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
And some of these earliest signs were actually used informally to denote the membership of specific groups, right?
Yeah.
So when we go back and think about our flag episode, early Christians used a cross, or I believe it was called the ichthys,
Okay.
which was a fish, to denote religious affiliation. So sometimes if you're driving, you'll see an ichthys on somebody's car, for example, right? Yeah.
Right.
So the sign of the sun or the moon would serve as the same purpose for pagans, I think, which is, that's what's on your car, right?
Yeah, right. The sun and the moon. You're right. And here's what's interesting too. These signs and these symbols, they developed, as you said, just over thousands of years because most people were illiterate. I'm not talking about, just today. I'm talking about, thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about some of these symbols, if you remember, Elliot, on our flag design episode.
Yep.
They were used to communicate loyalty, fealty, and, nationality. And retail signage and promotional signage, they appear to have developed independently in the East and West. In antiquity, Egyptians, Romans, Greeks, they were all known to use signage. And in ancient Rome, signboards, usually made from stone or terracotta, because that's what they had.
Right.
They were used for shop fronts and to announce public events. And alternatively, the whitened areas known as albums were used on the outer walls of shops, forums, and marketplaces.
Huh.
So, I mean, as you can tell, I kind of dig this. There's a really great book about that I'll post a link. But one Roman example from days of yore is a bush to indicate a tavern, which is where the proverb, "a good wine needs no bush," meaning something truly good doesn't need to advertise, comes from. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but that is a perfect example as we find ourselves sitting in the bar. Maybe we're looking at our Absolute bottle, right?
Right. My point is that some of these icons later evolved into trademarks, and this suggests that the early history of commercial signage is intimately tied up with the history of branding and labeling, although they didn't know that at the time.
Okay, Todd, enough about all of this sign stuff. Let's get back to me and my haircut, okay?
Okay. Sad story, but okay.
Yeah. So even if you don't visit a true barber shop to get your hair cut or styled or whatever phrase you want to use, my guess is a barber pole is still very familiar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So did you ever wonder why this is a symbol all around the world? If you stop and think about this for a second, why not scissors or a comb, or maybe both overlapping, hammer and sickle, Soviet style, right? To signify a practitioner of the tonsorial arts.
Ooh, tonsorial arts. That sounds fancy. That's a new thing there.
Yeah, well, Todd,
Does that mean... Oh, hang on. I just got it. Does that mean those were the people that cut out your tonsils?
I wouldn't go to a barber for a tonsillectomy.
Well, Middle Ages, things were tough.
That's true, yeah.
You had to make do with... You didn't have much time. You had to go get your tonsils cut out and your hair cut at the same place.
You're actually not too far off here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So tongue firmly planted in cheek, but you're more right than you know. So where did the barber pole come from?
Yeah.
So what's the meaning behind this thing, right? Because, we inherently know that it means, I can get a haircut here, but why is a candy stripe pole? Why does that mean that?
Right.
So the profession of barbering has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the Middle Ages, but it's actually mentioned in the Bible.
Yeah.
It was introduced in Rome in 296 BC, and barbers quickly became both popular and prosperous, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Much like today, their shops were the centers for daily news and gossip, and all the free men in Rome were clean-shaven. So the slaves had to wear beards. So there was this cultural signifier there. And it's from the Roman or Latin word barba, B-A-R-B-A, meaning beard, that the word barber is derived.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Interesting. Maybe they can make a Gladiator sequel called Barber.
Lots of sharp things used in both cases.
Yeah. So, okay, can I ask you a question? Oh, not ask, but just clarify. So, as a symbol of wealth and prosperity in ancient Rome, you would have a clean-shaven face, right?
Yeah.
Because you had people that would care for your hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Got it.
Do you know why ancient soldiers weren't allowed to have beards?
Because you could yank on them in battle.
You got it. Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, so they couldn't be grabbed in combat. And this was one of the insights, actually, that made Alexander the Great, made him great.
That's what gave him his last name.
Yeah, so barbers were hanging around soldiers, okay, because they were making sure they didn't have these beards. And soldiers have a certain, shall we say, medical needs.
I'll say.
Right?
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah, things like dressing wounds, bloodletting. I mean, Todd, I know that's your favorite medical procedure. Cupping, leeching, enemas. How about tooth extraction, right? And this was all work that the academically trained quote-unquote surgeons felt was beneath them.
Wow. So yeah, you're right. I wasn't too far off with the tonsil removal. They were practicing. It was kind of like they were the ER of ancient times.
Yeah,
right? They were
sort
doing
of
all these things
triage. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They were. And you're like, I gotta have my blood let, and while we're at it, I'll take an enema.
And what about these damn bunions?
And remove this tooth. And by the way, my beard's getting too long. Aloysius grabbed it the other day in war practice.
Aloysius? Okay. Isn't that your middle name?
I wish.
Yeah. So, originally, religious folks, the clergy, folks like monks, used to do this work as part of their tending to the sick, right? That's one of the traditions, the ecumenical traditions. But Pope Alexander III put a stop to it in 1163. He said, forget it. And since the barbers were involved not only with hair cutting and hairdressing and shaving, but also with surgery, they were actually called, quote-unquote, barber surgeons. Okay? So they formed their first organization, essentially a guild, what later became a guild, in France in 1094. So a long time ago. Yeah. And then it became a true guild in that it was recognized by, royalty or the government or whatever in 1391. So you mentioned the Middle Ages earlier. So this is happening in the Middle Ages.
Yeah. Okay.
And then over the centuries, the barber became a profession that was accepted in academic circles in France, in England, and, Europe and rest of Europe and beyond. And this guy, Ambroise Paré. How about that for French pronunciation?
That was nice.
Ambroise Paré. 16th century Frenchman considered the father of modern surgery. This guy started his career as a barber surgeon.
Okay, so the pole?
Oh, yeah,
remember?
right. I forgot. We got off. I was so excited about leeches and bloodletting and tooth extraction.
And enemas.
Yeah, that I forgot. Well, everyone's excited about an enema. Okay, so yeah, that dirty work work that I mentioned and that we've been talking about. The origin of the barber's pole appears to be associated with bloodletting. Okay?
Wow.
So the original pole has a brass basin at its top representing the vessel in which leeches were kept, and then a second bowl at the bottom representing the basin that received the blood. So when the leeches were doing their work and some veins had been cut, the blood has to go someplace. So the pole itself represented the staff that a patient held onto and gripped to make their veins more prominent during the procedure, right? So someone wasn't just hacking away into their arm or whatever. And the red and white stripes represented the bandages used. Red for the ones stained with blood during the operation, and the white represented clean bandages that hadn't been soiled yet. And these bandages would be hung out to dry after washing on the pole and would blow and twist together in the wind, and that would form the spiral pattern similar to a current modern-day barber pole.
Oh my God! So you would go into this place and they would use recycled bandages on you?
Well, Todd, this was, you're lucky they were using bandages at all. This was the Middle Ages. I don't think germ theory was popular.
They're like,
yet.
grab this pole. We're going to start cutting and putting leeches on you. And by the way, here's some bandages that Aloysius used.
And let me go to the blacksmith. We'll get some pliers and then we can pull your tooth out.
So I can see that. That's not a very big leap then, from sort of bandages kind of hung out to dry, red and white, blowing, twisting in the wind, and some clever person said, that gives me an idea.
Right. So the bandages became recognized as the emblem of the barber surgeons we talked about earlier. And later in time, the emblem was replaced by a wooden pole of white and red stripes. And those two colors are recognized as the actual colors of a barber.
Yeah, I've seen that, but I see ones with blue in them as well.
Yeah. So a majority of the ones today have blue mixed in as well. And there are a couple popular reasons for that. First, I think is fairly obvious. So red, white, and blue are the colors widely used in America due to the fact that our flag has these colors, right?
Huh, interesting.
So, very patriotic. Now, another interpretation is that the red represents arterial blood.
Right.
The blue is symbolic of the venous or non-oxygenated blood, so the blood that's still inside the body.
Right.
And then the white depicts the bandage.
Okay, yeah.
But after the formation of the United Barber Surgeons Company, isn't that a great name? So it sounds like a union or something. So the United Barber Surgeons Company in England, which was their guild. We had mentioned this guild had started in France. Now there's one happening in England. A statute required barbers to use blue and white on their pole. and surgeons to actually use a red and white pole. So these two ideas were combined. So that was the other theory.
Okay. Oh, all right. So let me see if I'm understanding this.
Mm-hmm.
So the United Barber Surgeons Company Guild in England,
Yeah.
they created a statute that said barbers, like your dirty work,
Yeah.
they were blue and white stripes, and then surgeons who did the more heavy lifting, cutting and stuff, they used a red pole.
Yeah, red and white. Yep.
So how did we get to what barber poles are now?
Yeah, this is interesting. So while doing some research about this, I also found out that in Renaissance era Amsterdam, surgeons used the colored stripes to indicate that they were prepared to bleed their patients, red,
Okay.
set bones or pull teeth, white, right? Bones and teeth are white, or give a shave if nothing more urgent was needed. And that was blue. So it was different signs. It's like, I only feel like shaving a guy today. I'm not pulling out any teeth. So...
Yeah. All I could think of is like a kid, his mom hauling him in to get a tooth pulled, and he's like, no, I just need a shave. Really.
Why are you shaving a kid?
I'm just here for a shave.
Yeah, there were no... I wonder if the Amsterdam dental office also had highlights. Like a Dutch version of highlights. Okay, so Todd, I'm personally a fan of the red, white, and blue combination for a couple of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So first, red and white only says candy cane to me. It says Christmas time, not haircut time.
Right.
So to me, I look at red and white and just think peppermint. And second, I became aware of barber poles as a little kid and have always loved them. And if you listen to our episode about 1976 and you know how much I loved flags and the bicentennial logo when I was little, a spinning pole with red, white, and blue magically spiraling up and disappearing into the unknown was sort of like a lava lamp or something. I just absolutely loved it. It was hypnotic to me.
Yeah.
I still love it just as much. Several years later, I ended up buying a vintage working barber pole.
Really?
It spins, it lights up, it does everything. And for a true aficionado, it's a Marvy 55, if anyone wants to know what model and make of barber pole this is, because there are actually a lot out there.
Wow. I'm with you on the kind of the mystery of how that the pole worked. I'm like, where did those lines go when I was a kid too? So I'm still kind of like, they're still around today, right?
Oh yeah.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, the symbol is there, but at least where I get my hair cut, they don't do enemas. So
Well, maybe you just haven't talked to the right people.
why don't you say more?
We love a little controversy and scandal here in the bar, right? I mean, that's
Yes,
your
we do.
métier, if you will. Okay, so I have a couple of nuggets here for you.
All right.
First, there's a turf war going on with barber poles. Did you know this?
No.
Okay, so in some states, remember we talked about the guilds and the unions and all this stuff? So in some states, barbers feel that only a true barber shop, not a beauty salon, has the right to use barber poles because of all the heritage we mentioned, and also the fact that beauticians aren't trained to do things like shave people, right? You don't want some random person putting a straight razor on your throat.
Yeah, a lot of Law and Order episodes start like that.
or Mafia or whatever. Yeah,
Right.
And second, in South Korea, you'll love this since you're a man of the world.
Okay.
In South Korea, barber poles are used for both legitimate barbershops but also brothels.
What?
So the brothels are disguised as barbershops.
What?
Yeah, but they're more likely to use two poles next to each other, actually spinning in opposite directions, but sometimes they'll actually just use one pole. So yeah, I guess you sort of wander in and you're like, I don't know if I'm getting a...
I'd like the 2-pole special.
Well,
please,
I think if you just say, I'd like a little trim.
Hey! You've been sitting on that one a while, haven't you?
I have. But actual barbershops, Todd, they're more likely to be hair salons rather than quote-unquote barbershops. To avoid confusion, they'll actually use a different barber pole that shows a picture of a woman with flowing hair, an illustration on it, and the words hair salon also written on the pole. And in my opinion, I mean, a woman on the barber pole with long flowing hair, that should be the pole outside the brothel, not the other way around.
Wow.
But anyway, so that's the sordid origin story and current state of barber poles.
Wow. Well, now I know why your haircut looks the way it does. And you went to a barber, got an enema, had some bloodletting, lost a tooth. And man,
That's
so
right.
cool. I didn't know all of that. All this talk about barbers, it's making me think.
Oh, that you should get us some tropical drinks with fresh cut fruit?
Well, I guess if that will get us to a mid-roll break, yes, I will. Okay, we'll be back.
By the light, of the silvery moon, I want to spoon with my honey and fruit of two.
Hi. We want to take a moment to mention that if you're enjoying this episode, we have an archive of topics ranging from the Olympics to movie posters,
Think Ghostbusters,
iconic images,
think Bigfoot,
punk music,
the Ramones,
Saturday morning cartoons,
the Pink Panther.
and failed products like OK Soda. Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com for full episode notes and visuals, the latest blog content, and to sign up for our newsletter.
Follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Find the links on our website or search using the phrase Two Designers Walk Into a Bar.
Most importantly, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find podcasts like this.
And tell a friend about us. Send them a link to our podcast from your listening platform of choice.
And if you're inclined, buy our merchandise. Stickers, coasters, magnets, t-shirts. We're designers. We make good stuff, and it helps support the show.
Get in touch. Use the contact form on our website or send an email to hello@twodesignerswalkintoabar.com.
We read every message we get. Honest.
And we're available for speaking gigs. Email us to learn more.
Okay, now, back to the bar. All right, so we're back. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you got your drinks freshened up. Elliot was just talking about the history of barber poles and all of the, quote, dirty work associated with that. And so let me change gears a little bit, Elliot. I'm going to talk about kind of the upstanding, highbrow world of pawnbrokers, right?
Okay.
Do you know what the symbol of a pawnbroker is?
Well, Todd, as I glance inside my my glass here, the cocktail you've been so kind to provide, I see a subtle clue. I see 3 cherries sitting in it, which reminds me, 3 gold balls, right?
3, yes. And I bet you were thinking, 3 gold balls. Wasn't that a Bond villain that never quite made it?
Gold baller.
Yeah, gold baller. Yeah. Do you expect me to talk? I expect you to stare into my shining gold balls, Mr. Bond.
You know what's funny is, you remember there is the other villain who actually has 3 nipples. So if we'd combined those 2 villains, that would have been great.
Oh, God, we're going to have to put a warning on this episode as well now. We're like 2 minutes into it.
We've been at the bar a while, folks.
Yes, we have. But you're right. Universally recognized, much like a barber pole is. But I think everyone knows what a pawn shop is, but just for our shared terminology. It's this establishment that if you need money, they will lend you money. You take in something of value and
So collateral, essentially, right?
right, they hold on to it and they give you cash. And if you don't return with said cash and some interest, they keep your material and they sell it and make some money off of it. And you're right, the pawnbroker symbol, it's 3 gold balls suspended from a bar. So it's like, it's sort of like if you had 3 gold Christmas ornaments hanging from, a bar. And that became the symbol of a pawn shop. You mentioned the barber pole kind of had a fairly universal understanding. I mean, there were some little deviations there, but it basically came from the same place.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much with the gold balls. There were multiple meanings, and some of them are kind of mysterious and kind of linked up.
Okay, I'm curious. You piqued my curiosity.
All right. And as we were talking about earlier, that symbols were used in ancient and medieval times because a lot of people couldn't read.
Yep.
And this is exactly for the same reason. So I'm going to give you kind of 3 origin stories, and they're a little, well, 2 of them are connected. One of them is like, way out. But anyway.
Does it involve aliens?
We'll see. Let's see if we can work aliens into it.
Okay.
Right now, it does not.
Okay, well, we'll fix that.
That's a really good challenge then. Okay, so there was this practice called Lombard banking, which originated in Lombardy, the northern part of Italy. That's where, that's where Vince Lombardi settled.
That's where the Super Bowl trophy originated.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Lombardy area of northern Italy, and those symbols, sort of a shield with balls on it, that was associated with that region of Lombardy.
Okay.
Now, what was happening was money lenders were originating in that area, became popular. They went on to other parts of Europe, like France and England and Amsterdam, and the word Lombard became actually synonymous with banking and lending. You probably even heard of a Lombard house, or even like in the financial district of London is Lombard Street.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise that these symbols kind of grew out of that, and it continued on, and even the word Lombard is still really, it's popular in some areas of the world, like Ukraine and Poland and Russia.
Huh.
And was still sort of symbolic of money lending up until the late 18th century in parts of England.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of, confusion here, why that shield-bearing balls is a symbol of Lombardy in that region of Italy. And it's often said that it was derived from the coat of arms of the very powerful, very rich Medici family. You've heard of them, right?
Oh, yeah. I remember.
Lorenzo, Cosmo, Cosmo 3 gold balls, Medici. You've heard of him?
I remember the Medicis from my art history classes.
True. Major patrons of the arts. They were a famous dynasty, Italian dynasty. They were bankers. They were based in Florence.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get to that in just a second. We're going to get to a little bit more of a Medici connection here. But back to Lombards. These medieval Lombard merchants, they used these 3 gold circles at the time as symbols. And, again, their job was giving people money if they needed it, or loaning people money. And then in turn, they would get a little interest back. To symbolize that, they hung these 3 circles outside their houses, and they were said to represent Byzance, which is a gold coin, basically from the East. And really interesting kind of history of that. It was minted in the East and from like the Byzantine Empire, right, which lasted hundreds of years. So they were gold coins, and they were used at the time. Again, gold coins from the East, Byzance. They were symbolized with these gold circles or gold balls that would hang outside.
And then I guess if they didn't want to work with you, they would just say, none ya business.
You've been sitting on that one as well, right?
Yeah, I got a million of them, Todd. And that's exactly what everyone's afraid of.
Hey-o. So I'm, just a real quick sidebar here for a second. These services were incredibly popular. And in England, that a pawn shop was called a lombard, as I said before.
Yeah.
And the houses of Lombard, that's what they called banks. And even, in fact, England's King Edward III famously pawned his jewels to the Lombards in 1388 to finance the war against France, which why wouldn't you, right?
You got them. They're lying around. They ain't doing anything.
I know, right. And even, a more relative story, you remember Queen Isabella from Spain, she pawned her jewelry to help pay for Columbus and his expeditions to the New World.
Interesting.
Yeah. And while we're talking about England, up until the late 19th century and the early 20th century, there were as many pawnbrokers as there were public houses.
Wow.
And they would lend you money for anything, like from bed linens, cutlery, take in whatever you want, your father's best suit. And because, you think about it, like that time in England, there were people that there were some haves and some have-nots, right? And the people that were living on the edge of poverty were constantly in fear of, going to the poorhouse or the workhouse, as they called it, right? If they couldn't pay their debts. So they would do anything to avoid that. And that meant just like taking in your clothes, your wedding rings, your shoes, anything just to get a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, do you know that the nursery rhyme Pop Goes the Weasel is actually about pawnbrokering?
No way. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Now, all right, sorry. I know this is a sidebar, but let me give you let me drop a little nursery rhyme bomb on you.
Are you going to spit some bars, Todd?
I am.
Okay, go for it.
Sit back. Okay, so, there's a million trillion different verses, right? One verse says, half a pound of tuppenny rice, half a pound of treacle. That's the way the money goes. Pop goes the weasel. So this song is from 1850, and pawning was known as popping.
Huh. Okay.
Not like your friend Macklemore was popping some tags, at the Goodwill. That's a different kind of popping.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And not popping and locking.
Not popping and locking.
Like you on the dance floor.
You could, if you wanted to go to the pawn shop and pop and lock, but they would still say, okay, but give me, your clothes.
That's when they'd say, none your business.
That's right. And so a weasel was actually a coat, by the way. And this is, you're probably familiar with rhyming slang, weasel and stoat.
Like Cockney.
Yeah. Weasel and stoat was another way of saying coat. But anyway.
So, Todd, banking kept developing. The banking system today is fairly sophisticated, but pawnbrokers still exist.
Right.
And it seems to me that they're sort of the financial institution, shall we say, for what we euphemistically today refer to as the unbanked, right?
Yeah.
The people who maybe need money but don't have a traditional bank account.
Thank you. Good way to say that. Yes. So both institutions are still around, right? Now, let's get back to our story of the 3 gold balls.
Yeah, I was like, this has nothing to do with the 3 gold balls.
I know. Yeah, you were like, wait a minute. We're talking about, 1 minute we're talking about pulling teeth and enemas. The next minute we're talking about hawking your weasel.
We're talking about gold balls. This is really a health episode.
Like we're hawking your weasel and all right. So the first explanation for the gold balls came from the Lombards, right? It was gold coins. It was a symbol of, hey, if you need some money, bring your clothes in here, bring your shoes, bring your weasel, we'll give you some money.
Pauly Shore.
That's right. Now, I mentioned the connection to the Medicis, very powerful family. This is the most common origin of the gold balls. The Medici reign started in early 15th century and ran up until the 18th century, 1730s or something.
Okay.
Powerful banking family. Everyone's heard of. Great art patrons as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's believed that those symbols of Lombardy came from the Medicis themselves, because their coat of arms had these balls on them, but they were actually like red balls on a gold background. And they would have, sometimes throughout the years, they would have 11, sometimes they would have 9, sometimes they would have 8 or 5 or 6. And eventually it kind of settled on 3. But the mystery of where those balls came from and what they meant is still sort of out there. Like, one theory for the Medici coat of arms balls is it was studs on the real shields that their followers used in battle.
Okay, so it was something physical or utilitarian. It was how the shield was built or reinforced.
Yeah. It was a symbol of a real shield. It was studs on a real shield. The second sort of theory was they represented red pills, because the early Medici family, they were also in pharmaceuticals. They ran pharmaceutical shops,
Okay. Yeah.
drug
wow.
shops.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could represent oranges grown in the Medici gardens. They were in everything.
Yeah, and oranges are on a tree branch, similar to one of these signs.
Right. One of my favorites, though, is it represented the heads of the enemies that the ferocious Medici warriors chopped off, and they're like, "Well, we're just going to put that on our coat of arms here, so you remember who we are."
Yeah. Come to the pawnbroker that has the head of other patrons on a pike.
Right. But regardless, so the most common theory of where the balls of Medici came from was from a Medici warrior that was in service to Charlemagne. And he was Charlemagne the king, not Charlemagne the god, in case you were wondering.
Yeah, thanks for
that.
clearing that up. I was confused.
And as in service to Charlemagne, this warrior used 3 sacks of stones to kill either a giant or a dragon. It's a little unclear. Maybe it was a giant dragon. I don't know.
That's what I was thinking. Smash it together. Yeah.
It could be, yeah. Interestingly enough, you talked about guilds before with barber poles.
Mm-hmm.
Guilds, crazy important and popular in the medieval time, particularly in Florence. And there was a guild called the Arte de Cambino, and it's one of the major 7 guilds of Florence, which that literally just translates to art of changing, so money changing.
Okay.
And it originated way back in the 12th century. And of course, like all guilds, they had a symbol, and their symbol was a coat of arms with a red shield and gold circles. Again, the gold circles were meant to represent gold coins, the Byzants there. So it's kind of believed that that's where the gold balls originally came from, but the Medicis were like, we'll take that symbol and make it ours. And then, obviously it kind of got all around.
Yeah. It's sort of, they took the shield, going back to your story about the shield with the giant rivets.
Yeah.
They just flipped the colors, removed the shield, and boom, that became their sign.
Yeah. That's basically it. So because of the popularity, obviously, and the influence of the Medicis, which had adopted the 3 balls, other banking and lending families soon adopted the same symbol. They're like, hey.
Sure, they wanted to look legitimate. Yeah.
So they're like, hey, they're doing well. Let's also have gold balls. And throughout the Middle Ages, there were these signs and symbols, coats of arms, which represented the gold balls. And, it could be representative of orbs or plates or discs and coins, like, just things to symbolize monetary success. Like if you were rich, you had plates, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So whatever the reason, the gold balls came to be known as like money and success. Now, oddly enough, they started as circles, right? But eventually, as they were hung outside these institutions, they made them more 3-dimensional to get more attention. So they made them more spherical to get more attention.
Yeah, makes sense. It could be red, like the barber pole is a cylinder, so no matter what angle you're looking at it from, you can read it.
Right. Good point. So interestingly enough, that's two kind of origin stories that marry together a little bit there. The third one is a little bit out of left field. And
is this the aliens?
Yes, aliens and Santa Claus. So Santa Claus is responsible.
This sounds like a great movie we should watch.
They're actually, speaking of, sidebar, Santa Claus Saves Christmas from the Martians, starring a young Pia Zadora.
Oh,
yeah, you got to
okay.
watch that. You got to look.
We need to have movie night in the bar.
We do.
We'll put a link to the trailer to that in this episode on the episode page.
That's a great idea. But all right, so let's talk about Saint Nicholas. Saint Nicholas, he was a 4th century Greek bishop.
Okay. And
he is known now as the patron saint of pawnbrokers.
That's how he gets all those toys.
That is, yeah. You got to get wholesale, man, if you're buying that many toys. So he was a giver. Saint Nicholas was a giver, right? And as the story goes, there was a poor farmer, and he was too poor to get his daughters married.
This sounds like the setup for a joke.
Yeah. There was a traveling salesman who met a poor farmer who was, yeah.
He said, but you have to sleep in the barn, but don't touch my daughter.
That's right. And so, the idea, think about it like back in the day, back in the 4th century, like if you couldn't afford a dowry, like your daughters, unfortunately, they weren't going to be married off. They couldn't have kind of a successful marriage family. They were sort of destined to be destitute.
Yeah.
You had to have money. And St. Nicholas, as legend goes, he snuck around one night and he left 3 bags of gold in the poor man's window to go to his 3 daughters so they could get married and have happy families and be prosperous in their life. So again, we thank St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, for his generosity and for giving us the 3 gold balls and the symbol of the pawnbroker.
And now, today he just gives everybody a Coke at Christmas.
That's true. I thought the Cokes came from the polar bears, though, but I guess that was a different
the polar
story.
bears keep them cold, give them this Santa Claus, and then Santa Claus actually distributes them.
But, it makes me wonder, like, why are there not 3 gold balls on Santa Claus, Like they're.
I've never seen Santa Claus naked.
Well, yeah.
I don't know what reference material.
I'm gonna shock you here and say I've never seen Santa Claus. So.
Oh yeah, well that too.
Well, actually, I saw him at the mall. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe if you sat on his lap and tell him what you want for Christmas, you'll get a little bit of a surprise.
No, that's why I don't want to sit on Santa's lap. It has something to do with those gold
3
balls.
Gold balls.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if I got bags of gold, maybe. Yeah. But anyway, as we wrap up this episode talking about barber poles and gold balls, let's just give thanks to St. Nicholas for his generosity. For the gold balls and for the gold to the daughters and being the symbol of the pawnbroker.
Speaking of thanks and speaking of generosity and speaking of
here we go.
Giving.
Here we go.
Yeah.
I see this
Todd,
coming.
you may as well give our bartender some money and a nice fat tip when you pick up our next round of drinks.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again soon.
Bottoms up.